Hi, my name is Scarecrow, and these are the games I played this month. First up is Evering, a pixel art RPG. I've been following this game on Twitter for a little while because I thought the pixel art looked cute, and I haven't played a pixel art RPG in a little while, so I thought it would be fun. I was fortunate enough to win this game from the devs directly on Twitter through a little giveaway they were doing to promote the release of the game, and I thought it was pretty fun. The game has pretty pixel art and a consistent art style, which I enjoyed throughout the entirety of the story. It took me about 20 hours to finish the game start to finish. I didn't do absolutely everything in the game, but I did enough to make me feel satisfied with the amount of the game that I'd played. It has an interesting, unique story that I won't spoil for you here. If you do find any of the games that I played this month interesting, I'm not going to go too far into story spoilers for each of them in case you do feel like playing them yourself. It's definitely a story that I haven't played in any other game. It doesn't fall into the trap of just being a stock standard story about an unnamed hero trying to beat a big bad evil demon or whatever the flavor of the month is for that type of RPG. It's got a unique story that goes in some interesting directions. There is lore there if you want to get really deep into it. I just took it at face value. It can be a bit overwhelming because this is a complete world that you get thrown into with plenty of factions and alliances and history there. But I managed to get through it without feeling too lost. The roster of characters you end up with by the end of the game is a unique bunch as well, made up of various different archetypes of people. While I wouldn't say the characters are super memorable, I would say they are unique enough to stand out from other RPG parties. The writing is okay. I didn't find anything too special. There were a few mistakes here and there. It didn't blow me away on the writing front. I am a sucker for really good writing, and playing a few really good text-based RPGs has kind of raised the bar of what I really like in stories and RPGs, but the writing is okay to good, I would say. The story and the game definitely doesn't outstay its welcome. At 20 hours long, I felt like it was enough time to get into the world, to get invested in the story, and then wrap up at a nice pace. I feel like any longer than that, and the game would have started to wear a bit. I know RPGs can be terrible when it comes to pacing, but this one I found to be quite consistent all the way through. And it also comes with a great feature that I would love to see in more RPGs, just because it's a great quality of life feature, which is you can skip any combat encounter in the entire game. Some people might say that it's dumbing the game down a bit, but I found it really refreshing because there are so many encounters in this game, like a lot of turn-based RPGs, where it really becomes a bit of a slog, especially revisiting areas where you're so high level above creatures in the zone that fighting them doesn't give you anything. So just being able to skip every combat encounter, no strings attached, there's no conditions on whether you can skip or not, it's just skip, the combat has ended, move on. You can even do this for major story battles throughout the game. If you feel like a boss is just unbeatable, you aren't geared towards a specific encounter, you can skip it, and the game doesn't suffer from that. I'd love to see it in more RPGs. There are so many times in RPGs where you come across either a boss that's really unbalanced or a zone that is really annoying to get through, and this would just be a great feature, being able to improve the pace at the cost of your own combat experience. There were a few cons I found with the game, things I wasn't a huge fan of. There was a general lack of soundscape in some areas. I do really like immersive audio in games, and I found that this one was kind of lacking in a lot of areas. There wasn't a lot of background chatter or noise. It was just a bit cookie cutter when it comes to the sound of areas, and it took me out of the world building a bit. The music was also fairly repetitive. I found myself replacing it with my own music after a little while just because it was on a very short loop and it got very old very quickly. The environments in some of the locations lacked a lot of interactivity that you find in other RPGs, like being able to click on things and explore. And aside from talking to people in towns and outside in the world, there wasn't a lot of actual things you could interact with. There wasn't a lot of life in the world, it felt like. A lot of little interactions you find in other RPGs can just help sell your sense of immersion, and there just wasn't a lot of that here. There was no leveling system or in-depth gear really. It was just rather fed to you at a consistent pace. I do like being able to create a powerful character in games, or if I don't know how to play a game, make a really bad character. I like that. I think that adds a little bit of personality to your game. The game in general kind of lacked a bit of depth in the combat just because there wasn't a lot of threats. I found that since the game kind of gave you everything you needed at a consistent pace, there wasn't a lot of threat there. I found up until the last boss, I didn't really feel like the game was a massive challenge, and I am by no means great at these games. The last thing I wasn't a huge fan of is that the party is really inconsistent. Members are always leaving and rejoining at specific points in the story, which made it a bit hard to connect with them, because you would play with a bunch of characters for like a little bit, and then one of them would leave, and then another one would rejoin, and then they would just constantly swap and revolve throughout the 20-hour story. So it was really hard to have a constant sense of a party and tactics with those people in your party. So I found that was a bit annoying. Overall, it was a fun game, and I enjoyed playing it. Up next is Far Gone. Far Gone is an RPG-based survival game, a bit like Stalker, where you're just let loose in a world to do quests and collect loot. And the thought of that really appeals to me. I like being let loose in a world to just explore and see what stories you can come up with, finding your own sets of gear and fighting monsters with cool weapons. I find that idea really fun. It's what a lot of people enjoy about the Fallout series, and why these games are so popular is the sense of freedom that it gives to players. The game has been in development for several years by a solo dev, which I give major props to. Dabbling in a little bit of game dev myself, I know how difficult it is to create a game of any magnitude, and I was impressed by a lot of things in this game, even though it is in a pretty rough state in terms of just overall smoothness of gameplay. I will preface this by saying the game is in early access, and since I've been following the game for a while, seeing how much the game gets updated, I must say I wasn't quite prepared for how early access the game still was. As usual, it suffers from a lot of the early access lack of polish. Performance isn't very good. There's a lot of just general bugs, especially when it comes to the UI. A lot of the UI does need improvements. It is in a bit of a rough state. It doesn't have a great soundscape. A lot of the sounds are very sudden or very loud or very quiet. It's not a very even experience. The mobs, for example, the creatures you come across in the game, they need more audio variety. There needs to be a bit more of a fade between soundscapes. Like I was near a beach and the audio was really loud really quickly, almost like a mini jump scare. There was a few audio bugs I found, like in a certain cave in a certain part of the map, my footsteps were doubled for some random reason. The game does need a better map. It does take from the Stalker series, where you do have a little pad with a bunch of information on it, and I found that the map wasn't very good. It needs a lot more interactivity. It needs to be able to zoom a lot more. Just one of the main takeaways, I think, is it is a very early access. I know that the dev is working on a lot of this stuff, but for a solo dev, this is like a long-term project. This is going to need a lot of time, because you can only work on one thing at a time. That's why I feel like giving good feedback along the way can only make the project better. Some things I did really like. The animations for the weapons that are in the game are smooth. The food animations are fun, like eating and drinking and stuff. There's not a lot of them, but they are really fun. The gunplay is good. I did have fun just running around the world killing things and doing its various quests, although a few of them did bug out on me, and I did fall through the seams of the world in a few places. There is the bones for a good game here. I feel like when this game is done to a state that the dev is happy with it, it will be a fun game. Next is Metal Hellsinger, which is a rhythm-based first-person shooter. I do like rhythm games, even though I suck at it. My sense of rhythm, I've found, is not very good at all. I find it hard to carry a consistent rhythm in like any rhythm game I play. I find it hard to do combos and stuff. But that being said, I did have fun with the game. The weapons are fun, especially the shotgun, even though I do feel like they're a bit unbalanced because I mainly used the shotgun throughout the entire game. The voice acting is good. I'm pretty sure that Troy Baker is in the game. I wasn't 100% sure, but it sounded a lot like him. The story is quite fun. The character designs are really cool. Playing as a demon lady with a bunch of weapons just was really fun, going through hell, killing a bunch of things to a really good soundtrack. It won't surprise you to know that this is a heavy metal soundtrack with a lot of great tracks. It's not the kind of music I'd have on my personal playlist to listen all the time, but for this kind of thing, it's perfect. It gets you in the zone, it gets you concentrated, it gets you really motivated to kill things, which is the kind of motivation you want in a game like this. And there is a lot of stuff to do in the game, even if the game is very short. I played the game for about 3.5 hours, and that was me completing the campaign. There are multiple difficulty levels, there are multiple challenges to do for each level, which do offer alternatives, but the story is very short just on a first playthrough. I'm sure you could rack up a decent amount of playtime if this was the kind of game that you could really get into, but for me, I was just playing it for the experience and the story, so it only took me about 3 hours, which can be a bit of a turnoff, I realize, for some people. There was a general lack of weapon variety because the game is so short. There was only a couple of weapons in the game, and I found that a few of them just weren't worth using compared to other ones, except for specific circumstances. As I said, the shotgun and the revolver were just the best weapons for me. There was a lack of enemy variety as well. There was only a couple enemy types, and once you figured out how to beat them, the game kind of settled into a very familiar rhythm, and it became just a bit samey when battling them. The levels weren't very distinct from one another either, I must say. Like, there's one of them that was a bit more distinct that I remember, but looking back on it now, they all just kind of blur together. I realized that it's like Hellscape, and that's kind of the theme of the game, but they all just tended to blur together a bit, and aside from one, like I mentioned, they weren't really the kind of things that stick in your mind. And the last thing I will say, the rhythm counter in the game that you use to keep on beat and keep in the rhythm of the game is a bit difficult for me personally to see and keep in concentration. It was hard for me to focus on the rhythm UI itself, and I was more relying on the beats of the actual music, which might be a design decision, but there were some times there where I just fell out of rhythm with the song, and when I was in the middle of the battle, I couldn't check the rhythm of the song by looking at the UI, because obviously you're being attacked by multiple demons, you don't want to die. You got to keep your concentration on what you're actually shooting to aim, but I also need to check the rhythm of the song, so there is a bit of a disconnect there that I found a bit challenging. Other than that, fun game, definitely not worth the full price of 45 Australian dollars, so I would say if you're going to get this game, get it on a deep sale, but definitely fun nonetheless. And to round out the games for the month, the last one I played is Uncharted 4. I'm not going to go into a massive section of Uncharted 4 because there are so many Uncharted 4 videos on YouTube, and they can enunciate so much better than me why the game is amazing. But I have played the game through a bunch of times now. First time on PS5, which was a fun experience, but I will admit I had a lot more fun playing through the game on a mouse and keyboard just because the combat was so much easier for me since I've been playing with a mouse and keyboard as long as I can remember. Just being able to aim more reliably made combat so much more fun. But I did play the game through consistently a bunch of times for a bunch of achievements, getting all the collectibles, going through, and it was a lot of fun. The game, as you know, is amazing. The story is amazing. The acting and cutscenes was fantastic. The world design, just everything about the game is top notch. I will say there was a few issues with the controls on mouse and keyboard because the game is made for a controller. A lot of the climbing in the game was a bit iffy with the mouse and keyboard, which I understand because it is like that in a lot of games. Just because of the way that the keyboard is set up, it's difficult to get diagonal movement sometimes, and for the game to know what you're trying to do. But it was a fun playthrough. I really enjoyed it. The story's great, the ending's great, gets you emotional, hits you right in the feels, especially if you've played all the other ones like I have. It was a really great end to the Uncharted story. And as much as I want a new game, I kind of just hope that they let Nathan Drake live his retirement. I think he's given enough to the gaming community for him to have earned the ending that he got. I do plan on replaying The Lost Legacy just because I got the Legacy of Thieves collection, which came with both games, and I do really like The Lost Legacy, but I also like variety in my gaming time. So who knows when that'll pop up in a video. Might be next month, might be 6 months from now, who knows. Anyway, those are the games that I played this month. Let me know in the comments down below, what have you been playing this month? I'm interested to see who still watches my channel, if anyone. I want to say thank you to the people that are still subscribed, even if you completely forgot that you were still subscribed to me and this is just an excuse for you to unsubscribe now that I'm back in your subscription feed. I totally understand. I haven't been active for such a long time. There have been so many things that I've been doing over the past year. I moved house, I got engaged, I've gotten older. I have less time to play video games and more time working, just like everyone else, but I still love gaming. I still love games. I have no idea what I want to do with this channel. This is just something fun that I enjoy doing. Since I'm playing all these games, I might as well talk about games and what I enjoyed and didn't like about them. If you do think that's a fun idea and want to stick around, I'd really appreciate that. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.